It is a time of legend. The galaxy is in flames. The Emperor's glorious vision for humanity is in ruins. His favored son, Horus, has turned from his father's light and embraced chaos. His armies, the mighty and redoubtable Space Marines, are locked in a brutal civil war. Once, these ultimate warriors fought side by side as brothers, protecting the galaxy and bringing mankind back into the Emperor's light. Now, they are divided. Some remain loyal to the Emperor, whilst others have sided with the War Master. Preeminent amongst them, the leaders of their 1,000-strong legions, are the Primarchs, magnificent, superhuman beings. They are the crowning achievement of the Emperor's genetic science. Thrust into battle against one another, victory is uncertain for either side. Worlds are burning. At Isstvan V, Horus dealt a vicious blow, and 3 loyal legions were all but destroyed. War was begun, a conflict that will engulf all mankind in fire. Treachery and betrayal have usurped honor and nobility. Assassins lurk in every shadow. Armies are gathering. All must choose a side or die. Horus musters his armada, terror itself the object of his wrath. Seated upon the golden throne, the Emperor waits for his wayward son to return. But his true enemy is chaos, a primordial force that seeks to enslave mankind to its capricious whims. The screams of the innocent, the pleas of the righteous resound to the cruel laughter of dark gods. Suffering and damnation await all should the Emperor fail and the war be lost. The end is here. The skies darken, colossal armies gather. For the fate of the throne world, for the fate of mankind itself, the siege of terror has begun. The civil war of the Horus heresy ravaged the domains of humanity to the point of ensuring its slow and inevitable extinction. From the precipice of peace absolute, the master of mankind's millennia-long toil to deliver the species to salvation faltered thanks to the efforts of his most cherished son. Booming laughter from the pantheon of chaos reverberated throughout the stars as 7 years of conflict wrought billions of deaths, perpetrated by the most foul abominations. Yet one battle alone would decide the fate of the Imperium, a confrontation which tore down the magnificent bastions of the Emperor's glory in the name of the Dark King. The attempt to usurp the throne world of humanity. The Siege of Terror. How can you see the good in this? Sanguinius asked the Khan. As he turned to look to the Warhawk, the first shells burst over the sky orbital plate, the last of Terra's artificial satellites. It hung low to the horizon, near the inner palace, its wide arrays of grav engines laboring to keep it aloft. The munitions exploded harmlessly, their fury vented into the warp by void shields. The dome of the plate's protective aegis shone with baleful energies. "Joy is an act of defiance," said the Khan. "With joy, we win, even if we lose. To have lived well is a victory all its own, for we all die. Death is unimportant to the laughing warrior. A poet makes tragedy glorious. That is why." The shells hit the main shields seconds after hitting Sky. The Aegis was wrought with ancient knowledge, jealously harbored by the priests of Mars. The voids comprising the Aegis reacted and roofed the earth with fire. Storms of flame shot out complex tangles of discharge lightning. The palace shuddered with the effort of buried machines as halls of generators fought to hold back the bombardment from the spires of the city. Beyond the Aegis's protection, the ground buckled. Towers of nuclear fire roared skywards from every horizon. Tremors shook the world. As the first round of shells hit, the fleet's energy cannons awoke, hurling shafts of burning light and streams of plasma down, so that the void shields danced and the view of the ships was lost. The Emperor's Praetorian looked into the inferno in the sky, his eyes focused somewhere past the fleet, deep into the hidden void, as if he could see beyond the bounds of the solar system and the material universe and out into the warp, where the fleets of Roboute Guilliman made all haste to the throne world. His gauntlets gripped the lip of the parapet lightly.
We will not fall.
He said with utmost certainty.
We will stand.
Following the destruction of the Spheres of Terra's defensive systems during the Solar War, the Throne World lay bare for invasion by the War Master's fleet. Having infiltrated the Sol system via Alpha Legion sleeper agents, summoned warp rifts, and pure brute force of their amassed armada, the traitors to the throne reveled at the chance to despoil the soil of Holy Terra. The first bombardments against the Sanctum Imperialis, intercepted by defensive laser grids, the Dark Age of Technology shield array known as the Aegis, rendered all subsequent attempts to damage the Imperial Palace useless. Unable to conduct an exterminatus purge of Terra from orbit, not only by virtue of his objective to claim the Throne World as its monarch, but also the countermeasures ensured by the Praetorian of Terra, Rogel Dawn, the War Master ordered the initial deployments. For every traitor which made planetfall, 300 mortal conscripts would answer their guns. The millions of souls cramped into trench lines and fortified bunkers of the palace's outermost wall, drowning the traitors in las fire and artillery. With each passing day, the most senior officers of the campaign convened with the High Lords of Terra, discussing the trajectory of the war, the efforts of Captain General Constantin Valdor, Malkador the Sigillite, Primarchs Rogel Dawn, Sanguinius, and Jagatai Khan, holding the line until the reinforcements of the 1st and 13th Legion could turn the tide of the siege. Knowing victory to be impossible alone, the defenders of Terra orchestrated strategies to blunt and forestall the traitor advance, the Emperor unable to aid their plight as he focused his immense psychic power to stave off the invasion of chaos within the Imperial Palace, while simultaneously fending off the assaults of the War Master's psychic presence. Keenly aware that the War Master sought to slay the Emperor as the catalyst to bring forth his new age of darkness, any and all sacrifices would be made to defend his throne room. For without the Master of Mankind, ensconced as its ruler, the Imperium of Man would inevitably fall. Informed of the Emperor's toil within the depths of the Sanctum Imperialis, Malkador informed his compatriots of the perpetual Primarch, Vulcan, at the side of the Emperor, ensuring his safety. As the first flames began to ignite upon Terra, first captain of the Sons of Horus, Ezekiel Abaddon, ruminated on the nature which his War Master now inhabited. The miasma of chaos barely contained within his form, as he sat immobile within the Lupercal's court of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. Clutching the skull of his slain brother, Ferrus Manus, within his now warp-contorted chambers, Abaddon looked with disgust at the fell icon of the ruinous power's favor, surrounded by zealots of the Wordbearer's Legion and their crimson apostle, Zardu Layak. Infuriated with his Genesire's seeming laxity, Abaddon waited impatiently as his legion stood in reserve. The legions not of the Lupercal, bearing the brunt of the system's fortification efforts, under the leadership of the Lord of Iron, Perturabo. Nominally supported by the fabricated general of Mars, Kelbor Hal, his brothers Angron, Fulgrim, and Magnus, Perturabo sneered at their malformed constitutions as willing thralls to the pantheon of chaos. Knowing that their corporeal forms would be disintegrated by the Emperor's light should they attempt to set foot on Terra's soil, the Lord of Iron identified a weak point within the Aegis defense system, Bastion 16, which his own forces could destabilize. Should the traitors add pressure to the palace's defenses, the Emperor's light would wane, allowing for the demon primarchs and demonic entities of chaos to cull the population centers of Terra and reinforce the traitor Astartes' assault. Deploying disposable traitor army auxiliaries consisting of cultists, beastmen, and mutants as cannon fodder. As loyalist forces repelled the lost and the damned, Alpha Legion insurgents drove knives into the backs of their allies. The Death Guard Legion, now arriving in system, fully corrupted by the influence of the Plague God, Nurgle. The fetid stench of their presence would prove a useful tool for the War Master's spread infection throughout the populace of Terra. With word that the 14th Legion would be the first to make planetfall upon Terra, the Red Angel, Angron, wreaked havoc within the bowels of his flagship, the Conqueror, which left unattended could erupt its warp core, destroying all within. Ship Mistress Lotara Sarin, besieging aid from the Painted Count, Gendor Scrivok, to confine the Lord of Red Sands within the Night Lord's labyrinth of the Voidcraft, Nightfall. His rampages restrained until the time to unleash him upon the throne world presented itself, thanks to the efforts of Khan placing a teleportation beacon onto his body. while Kelbor Hal and his disciple, Sota Null, sundered Arch Mechanicus Voidcraft in orbit of Terra. Their collision courses made with precision, only achievable by savants of the Dark Mechanicus. Their crash sites formed the Star of Chaos, surrounding the Imperial Palace. Their active void shields, allowing for the creation of siege engines, as waves of lost and damned spilled from their carcasses. Whilst Loyalist forces staved off this new threat, the Death Guard made planetfall. Aiding the beleaguered forces of Bastion 16, the Warhawk of Jagoris led his noble White Scars to confront the threat of chaos, their jetbike charges protecting the mortal soldiery against the advisements of Rogel Dawn. Managing to disrupt Dark Mechanicus landing zones, Jagatai Khan incurred a wound from a poisoned blade as hundreds of Mortarian sons clamored to end his life. Rescued by the Great Angel, Sanguinius pulled the Warhawk's body from beneath a mountain of lifeless Ceramite bodies, as First Captain Raldoron rallied the Blood Angels to reinforce their position. Passing through the Helios Gate of the Imperial Palace, the corrupting influence within Jagatai's body was cleansed by the Emperor's light, his legion breathing a sigh of relief as mutated Night Lord's raptors beset the palace, marking themselves as the first to step foot upon its walls. Loyalists began to fall victim to sickness and disease, the subsequent weeks of suffering compounded by the fell visage of the Crimson Apostle, Zardu Layak. Forming a looming representation of his face, using the suspended bones of slain warriors in the sky, Layak declared the Imperium lost, his proclamation ended by a shower of raining blood to herald the arrival of a new, terrifying foe. Ejected from the Nightfall, the Red Angel hurtled to the ground, killing thousands with his impact as merely the start of his murderous rampage. Sapping the Aegis shield using Warpbane guns manufactured by the Dark Mechanicus. As the remnants of trench lines surrounded the Imperial Palace were overwhelmed, the protective shielding fell. Smothering the Imperial Palace with orbital bombardments, the guns of Horus's fleet devastated the retreating Imperial army. Yet in their moment of direst need, Bright Wings took flight. Leading an enormous Blood Angels counterattack, supported by Imperial Fist and Legio Solaria suppressing fire, Sanguinius charged into the fray as the Imperial Palace gate swung open to give sanctuary to the withdrawing Loyalists. Casting back the Night Lords and their preening commander, First Captain Raldoron humbled the Painted Count and his demonic benefactor before casting him from the walls of the palace, the guns of Dawn's indomitable sons collapsing the Nurgle siege towers, encroaching towards the Bastion. Prevented from breaching what remained of the Emperor's psychic ward, Angron bellowed a challenge at Sanguinius to face him in single combat, a challenge which Sanguinius would accept later, at a time of his choosing. Tending to the wounded soldiers, now within the embrace of the Imperial Palace, the first protective layer of the siege had been broken. Yet for all the loss that had been incurred, its walls still stood tall.
Lord of Iron, the defenders are withdrawing in good order while we delay the pursuit.
With some surprise, he recognized the voice of Foryx, whom he had fought dead in the midst of the spaceport.
Dawn is playing for time. You would like that, wouldn't you, brother?
Perturabo declared, not deigning to respond to his triarch.
To take the petty road rather than settle this as generals. A brawl in the dirt may suit you, but it is not enough for me. You may brawl, but I am an expert swordsman.
The barb tugged again, but Perturabo would not be drawn by his brother's insults. He pictured again the vision that had sustained him.
I will crush you, Dawn. Forgebreaker shall shatter your armor and break your bones before we are done. But that proves nothing save my physical superiority. Before I end you, I will lay low everything you have raised. I will topple your towers and shatter your walls. I will deliver the War Master to our father, and you will watch everything you have trusted be torn apart. When you have nothing left but the rubble of your ambitions, and I stand triumphant amid the folly of your inferiority, when all the world's weeping will not save you, and all you have is regret for bricks and despair for mortar, when you look at me and know that you are bested by the Lord of Iron, and accept the truth of your hubris, only then will my victory be complete, and I will end your suffering.
Bold words from a man that sent his minions to do his fighting for him. Dawn stretched out a hand, gesturing to the spaceport and its surrounds. "1,000,000 souls it has cost you, for a few kilometers of ground. You always were wasteful, Perturabo, lacking finesse. When terror burns and the Emperor's corpse is ash, we will see the value of finesse." "Lord, Imperial Army forces are pulling out too. If we do not secure the sky bridges soon, we'll be facing them all again at the Lion's Gate." Perturabo cut the link to Forex with a snarl. "This is just the first wall." Agitated with the slow pace of the siege and his appointment to vanguard against the impending threat of Guilliman and the Lion, the Lord of Iron decried the Demon Primarch's inability to breach the Emperor's barrier when his own men could have succeeded where they had failed. As Horus Lupercal and Magnus the Red toiled to slowly diminish their father's projections, Perturabo devised a method for his more conventional strategies to achieve what his corrupted kinsman could not. Identifying the Lion's Gate spaceport as an objective of crucial importance, though it was among the strongest defenses of the Loyalists, should it fall, the losses they would incur would be catastrophic. Should the Hammer of Olympia claim the spaceport, Titan Legios could finally be deployed. The gigantic mesosphere elevator, capable of deploying his most deadly arsenal of heavy vehicles and sustaining a foothold within Loyalist territory. Dispatching Warsmith Kroger as a distraction for his nemesis, Rogel Dawn, to busy himself with. While his foolhardy son perished, his more subtle plans would come to fruition. Receiving word of the actions made against the Lion's Gate spaceport, Rogel Dawn, regardless of perceiving its intent to be a feint, mustered a response commanded by his Lord Seneschal, Fafnir Ran. Committing 18,000 Imperial Fist Astartes, supported by 800,000 mortal souls, to defend the spaceport, against the might of 25,000 Iron Warriors, 1.5 million mortals, hundreds of siege platforms, heavy armor, and a contingent of 3,000 World Eaters, led by Captain Khan, even from a defensive footing, victory could not hope to be achieved. Kroger's strategies interfered with by Primarchs Fulgrim and Mortarion during the engagement. Much to the surprise of the Iron Warriors, Fafnir's men were not manning the stronghold from within, but had formed a shield wall outside its defenses. Attacking the flanks of the traitors and encircling their position, within less than an hour, 300,000 mortals fell to the executioner of the Imperial Fists before his forces withdrew back within the walls of the spaceport. Stalling the advance of Khan's World Eaters for a time, regardless of the tactical brilliance of Ran, with the arrival of the Red Angel to the fray, his defenses seemed incapable of repelling such a rabid avatar of bloodshed. Repelled briefly by the Emperor's psychic shield, the mortal soldiery held firm, inspiring them to new heights of bravery. Tensions rising between Perturabo and his chaos-infused brethren, Horus deemed the Lord of Iron's critiques of their progress to be valid, and assigned first Captain Abaddon, Typhus, and Zardu Layak to bolster his next deployment. Allowing the Traveler and Crimson Apostle to perform a ritual to summon a demon prince of Nurgle, Korvax Utterblight to spread plague and disease within the palace's walls, Abaddon and Perturabo oversaw such ministrations. Receiving reports of chaos manifestations within the Sanctorum Imperialis refugee centers, Malkador the Sigillite ordered Custodian Amon Tauromachion to investigate the cult of the Lightbringers, banding around the first living saint of the Imperium, Euphrates Keeler. Noting warp phenomena to manifest within the presence of the Lightbringers, first Captain Sigismund witnessed the visions of Abaddon the Despoiler as the Ascendant War Master of Chaos Undivided in his father's place, and resolved to fulfill his holy ordained duty to end his life as the champion of the Emperor. As Warsmith Forex continued to assault the Lion's Gate spaceport, Magos Atariel of the Dark Mechanicus, with aid from Obliterator Volk, uploaded a demonically infused computer virus into the facility's systems, interfering with the spaceport surveillance as the Iron Warriors infiltrated the lower levels. Ordering Sigismund to reinforce the spaceport, despite his misgivings at his son's flourishing religiosity. As Imperial Fists began to fortify its position, Abaddon, Layak, Khan, and Warsmith Berossus joined the fray. Launching an airborne assault of the spaceport, Fafnir Ran's army faltered, himself barely spared from death as Sigismund's reinforcements rallied to save the wounded Seneschal. Fulgrim and the Emperor's children beset the walls of the spaceport, their undisciplined selfish desires getting the better of them as they captured prisoners for their own sick delight rather than focusing on their objectives. Launching a counterattack against the traitors, Sigismund, now imbued with the preordained favor of the God Emperor of mankind, charged into battle with renewed valor. His sighting of Abaddon tempting him a chance to prevent the calamitous future he had foreseen. Bested by Kharn in single combat as a result of his empowerment by the blood god, Khorne, the righteous champion of the Emperor would be saved with the arrival of his Genefather. Casting Kharn aside with no difficulty, the Praetorian of Terra carved a path through the traitor advance of World Eaters before setting his sights on Abaddon. Close to preventing the legacy of the Despoiler with a strike of his sword, Dawn's charge would be stalled by the efforts of Zardulayak's sorcery until the bite of Storm's teeth bit into his sickly, skeletal form. Detonating in a torrent of immaterial energy, the Crimson Apostle sacrificed his form to summon a warp portal upon Terra's soil, the influx of demonic entities forcing the Imperial Fist to withdraw from the spaceport. Simultaneously, Korvax's Utterblight possessed the followers of the Lightbringers. His manifestation confronted by Amon Toromachian, as Euphrates Keeler aided in the banishment of the entity from the material realm. Realizing her folly in adhering to blind faith, Malcador ordered Keeler be protected by Toromachian for the remainder of the siege, as he contemplated the potential results which humanity's manifested faith in the Emperor could change the future, both for good or ill. The Lionsgate spaceport was now held by traitor forces, despite the valor of Rogul Dawn, Perturabo's flagship, the Iron Blood, docking to allow the Lord of Iron to set foot upon Terra. Taunting Perturabo to a duel, the Hammer of Olympia restrained his fury, promising to murder his brother once the siege had been concluded and he had been crowned the victor. Withdrawing from the engagement, Rogul Dawn warned his nemesis of the folly of overconfidence, for only the first wall had fallen, and there were many more that the Hammer of Olympia must sunder. While Rogul Dawn lamented his failure to defend the spaceport, his kinsmen regardless commended him for his efforts, bleeding the enemy from far more wounds than even he could anticipate. For within the ranks of the Iron Warriors, a rift was beginning to form. For the sons of Perturabo had always been expendable, yet never so blatantly had they been hurled into the meat grinder of war by their own Primarch.
I am running the siege, Captain, said Dawn. I have been from the beginning, at every hour, at every moment, wherever I go and whatever I do. This will be no different, and, like me, Arcamus can multitask. The Grand Borealis is efficient and well prepared. The tacticians and the War Court offer fulsome support, and they have since day one. My dear brother does not need to be informed yet. You know as well as I do how occupied he is at Gorgon Bar.
But, Sepatus pressed, grace prevented. If you should fall,
I won't,
said Dawn.
My brother Belsepatus seems to doubt your prowess, my lord,
said Fane. There was some laughter from the line.
But concern is valid,
Fane went on, more somber.
You are the foundation of our defense, the architect of our fate. Is it wise to risk you by placing you at the forefront of a known flaw in this fortress?
Indeed, said Sigismund.
At a place where the very worst of our enemy is fully expected to stream in and unleash fury. I have done my utmost to make this palace a true fortress, said Dawn. I've built it from the ground up, diligently, some say obsessively, making sure that it is impenetrable and secure. But that is an impossible task. There will always be cracks. There will always be flaws. No fortress of mere stone and steel in our galaxy is truly impervious. So I must place myself directly before those cracks, and block them with my own flesh and fury.
He gazed at them, steadily.
I am the fortress now.
As the noose tightened around the Loyalists' throats, more desperate countermeasures were required to stem the tide of darkness. Yet as the defenders of Terra rallied, the Lord of Iron toiled on a gambit to breach their impenetrable fortress. Allying with the despondent first captain of the Sons of Horus, Ezekiel Abaddon, while his War Master harried the Emperor's psychic might within the warp, his mightiest son would not stand idle. as the great angel soared through the skies, felling the Goliath warlord Titan, Solemnis Bellus, the loyalist morale swelled. The sight of such a paragon of war casting long-venerated traitor captains from the walls of the palace, with nary an acknowledgement. As the angel perched atop Gorgon Bar, so too did the Warhawk upon Colossi Gate, the Eternity Wall held by Rogel Dawn's staunch gene-son, Camba Diaz. Yet one exploitable weak point still remained: the Saturnine Gate. Unwilling to simply command his men from afar, Ezekiel yearned to face his enemies with blade and talon once again. His wish permitted by the Lord of Iron, as they orchestrated a gamble to focus strike teams to breach the Saturnine. Aware of a flaw within the wall's defenses, large enough to accommodate a strike team to infiltrate and enlarge the breach, allowing for swarms of invaders to penetrate the palace's defenses. As Abaddon roused his mortal kinsman, Horus Aximand, and even the Phoenician to accompany him to the Saturnine Gambit, Rogel Dawn likewise informed his allies of Perturabo's likely intention to exploit the breach. Requiring a ruse to distract the traitors, as the vulnerabilities of Saturnine were fortified, the Praetorian would allow Eternity Wall to be sacrificed at the cost of hastening the enemy's deployments. Their last avenue to evacuate the Master of Mankind should the traitors continue to advance. Rogel Dawn, regardless of the risk, allowed for Knight Commander Janisha Kroll to fight as part of the doomed Eternity Wall defenders, who would doubtless perish to buy Saturnine's relief efforts time. Readying his Justaran elite, the Catulan Reavers of Falcus Kyber, Tybalt Mars 18th, and Mournival kinsmen, Abaddon enacted the clandestine operation beyond the sight of even the War Master's gaze. As 8 demonic champions of the ruinous Pantheon descended upon Terra, the defenders braced as fear ran within the hearts of not only mortal men or Astartes, but also the Primarch's indomitable resolve. Camba Diaz faced the World Eater's charge upon Eternity Wall, ordering his men to take no backward step as they fought to the last, knowing their sacrifice would ensure the survival of the palace. Arcan Land of the Mechanicus began to tend to the floor of the Saturnine's foundation with Lockreed sealant, Malcador bidding him to wait until the traitor strike team had entered the ambush, lying in wait. Organizing kill teams, each appointed names to signify their deeds, chosen warriors of Malcador, whether Knight Errant or Black Shield, would be supported by exemplars of both the Blood Angels and Imperial Fists. First Captain Sigismund would command Kill Team Devotion, 22nd Captain Maximus Fane, Kill Team Helios, and Captain Paladin Belsepatus of the Blood Angels Cherubim host would command Kill Team Brightest. The orphaned Astartes of Traitor Legion stock, the World Eater Black Shield Enrid Har commanding Kill Team Black Dog, Lunar Wolf Captain Garviel Loken leading Kill Team Naismith, whilst Death Guard defectors Helig Galor led Kill Team 7th, and Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow commanded Kill Team Strife. Unleashing their long unsated thirst for vengeance against Tybalt Mars' initial strike force, Loken avenged the life of the Iron Hands war leader, Shadrach Medusan, as a bolt round tore through Mars' skull. Garrow engaged Falcus Kyber, the Widowmaker, the wounds inflicted by Libertas gushing black, oily ichor, proving his corruption beyond all sense of what could be considered human, as the demon entity within him fled his broken body. The long-dead kinsman of Garviel Loken, Tarek Torgadon, clashing with the erstwhile son of Horus, now possessed by a demon referring to itself as Tormageddon, displayed abilities not dissimilar to every legion of the Astartes. Imbued with the bloodthirst of a World Eater, malice of a Night Lord, constitution of an Iron Warrior, the zeal of a Word-Bearer, the swiftness of an Emperor's Children duelist, the guile of an Alpha Legion operative, the insight of a Thousand Sun, and the constitution of a Death Guard. Indomitable alike to an Imperial Fist, swift as a White Scar, strong as a Salamander, sure as a Raven God, secretive as a Dark Angel, logical as an Iron Hand, savage as the Rout, wrathful as a Blood Angel, and bearing the uncanny invincible bearing of a son of Ultramar. Yet this creature was not a Lunar Wolf. Striking Tormageddon down with the blade of his fallen comrade-in-arms, Tylos Rubio, Loken bid the shell of his former brother farewell as he returned to fight beside his errant kinsman. As Abaddon's strike force diminished within the ambush set by Rogel Dawn, the Phoenician delighted in mutilating the Imperial Fists wounded by his hands at the Saturnine Wall. Struck by Sigismund beneath the looming presence of the Oannes gun tower, Fulgrim reeled before hurling the first captain away with the grace of a man striking a feral dog. Interrupting the killing blow before it could be struck, Rogel Dorn confronted his fallen brother, unburdening himself of his long isolation within his strategium. Armed with greatsword and shield, the Praetorian dueled the multi-limbed demon Primarch, baiting the egotistical Praefector of Chemos that he had known all along of Perturabo's gambit and had since thwarted the schemes of Abaddon's strike force. Hoping to entice Horus himself to a duel, Rogel Dorn remarked that taking Fulgrim's head would suffice. Retreating from the duel, as all cowards do, Fulgrim allowed for his sons to fight the Praetorian in his stead. Their otherwise impressive martial acumen, no match for the steadfast protector of Holy Terror. Aiding his Primarch in the skirmish, Sigismund lunged into the fray, his blade clashing with Lord Commander Eidolon before inflicting a glancing blow and casting the soul severed from Saturnine's walls. Trapping the Justarin within the killing chambers of Kappa and Lambda, Malcador's kill teams cornered and cut down Abaddon's foolhardy invaders. Realizing his manipulation by Perturabo as minor wounds ravaged his body, Ezekyle wrestled the shame knowing that he and his men were expendable, not just in the eyes of the Lord of Iron, but perhaps his own Genesire. Swearing to enact reprisal against Perturabo, Abaddon turned his fury against the champions of the Sigillite. The subsequent 13 minutes of concurrent duels ending the life of Belsepatus and Endred Har, the massive form of the Riven Hound pinning his body to the ground. His execution at the hands of Nathaniel Garrow denied, as a teleportation flare retrieved his battle-ravaged form. The noble battle captain despaired at the escape of his target. Confronting little Horus Aximand as he searched frantically for an escape route, Garviel Loken dispatched his betrayer with cold fury, claiming his sword, mourn it all. Stormseers of the 5th Legion harnessed fragments of the Emperor's Aegis to focus their arcanum, their ingenuity confounding the Thousand Sun sorcerers and the demons spawned from their magics. Jagatai Khan, alongside Constantin Valdor, faced the Neverborn in open conflict, the Lord of Iron's strategies unable to anticipate the fiery nature of the Kargan and his seemingly random assaults. Repelling the pawns of the Crimson King from the Colossi Gate, though victory had been achieved by the White Scars and Golden Host, the last remnants of Eternity Wall perished. Janecia Kroll, soulless queen of the Silent Sisterhood, faced the Chosen of Khorne, Khan, in battle. Her nigh-invisible culling of the Sons of Angron ended by a seemingly subconscious swing of the Betrayer's chain axe. Among the last defenders, a single mortal soldier stood, a man by the name of Ollie, standing defiant against the terrifying visage of the Red Angel. Holding high the banner of the Emperor as he charged into the maw of slaughter incarnate, the heroic last stand of Olanius Pius would live eternal within the minds of the historians of this fateful war. Night falls in the desert, but it brings no comfort to the man beneath the tree. Above him, the glare of the white sky fades into indigo, then to deep blue, and then to black. Stars appear, flickering in the dark. They are not real, any more than the dust and the smell of distant fires are real. They come from him. Stars, scent, image, even the concept of night as a metaphor to cloth this brief respite in the battle he is fighting. All are the way they are because this is the clothing his mind has made for what he endures. Here in the realm beyond sight, there is nothing that is not brought by those that come here. Once, long ago, but also only a moment past, and in a moment to come, this realm was void, without even the idea of dimensions or duration, so that it could be called empty. Long ago, long, long ago. Now it is a place filled with the refuse of its travelers, the husks of grand ambitions and dreams, the shadows of atrocity, and the secrets of the countless dead, and yet to be born. It is both a lie and the truest thing to ever be. Ever more beleaguered by the ravaging toll of the Immaterium, the Emperor's might continued to strain, interlocked with his fallen son's mind, as the War Master's advance marched ever forward. Yet among the depths of utter defeat, small glimpses of hope shine brightly. For with the withdrawal of the Phoenician from the fray, the Third Legion's already disorganized rabble became further distracted. Though the entire First Legion was still far from Terra's reach, a portion of its men, commanded by its most renowned exemplar, Corswain, now arrived in System, pledging to preserve the Throne World, and reports that the dead homeworld of the World Eaters, Nuceria, had been obliterated, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that reinforcements were en route. Knowing their forces capable of only lasting mere weeks on a protracted war footing, the Loyalists' only saving grace remained that the Lion of Caliban and Lord of Ultramar, once arriving in System, would make short work of what remained of the traitor's battle-worn forces. The restorer of the 5th Legion, Shiban Khan, rose from the ashes of his downfall from battle during the Eternity Wall. Visited by the ghosts of his brethren, Torgun, Targutayu Sugai, and Kambadiaz, while venturing to reunite with his comrades of the palace. His Primarch Jagatai Khan, standing vigil alongside First Captain Rauleron within the bastion of the Colossi Gate, waiting for an opportunity to retake the Lion's Gate spaceport. Horus convened with Perturabo to discuss progress of the siege, commending his efforts, whilst also revealing his knowledge of his failed Saturnine gambit. Exerting his fell influence over the Lord of Iron as a show of his omniscience and favor with the ruinous powers, Perturabo buckled under the domineering presence of the Champion of the Four. Demanding his forces to redeploy to the Mercury Wall, Horus would order his most mighty and loyal Titan Legio, Mortis the Death's Hand, to breach the defenses, using their entire amassed strength. More than 30 of the Legio fell during the suicidal charge towards the palace wall, their vapor-spewing, mutated husks littering the battlefield as power rams and warp missiles attempted to break the bastion. Knowing the final hour to be swiftly approaching, Malkador the Sigillite met with the Emperor within the depths of the Immaterium, finding his wearied avatar and offering his own psychic might to aid in his long vigil. Meanwhile, Argonis the Unscarred of the Sons of Horus relayed new orders from his War Master to the Lord of Iron, demanding the 4th Legion disperse to allow for the Death Guard to assume command of the assault of the palace. Signaling the end of Perturabo's Legion War of men and mortals, the Hammer of Olympia felt the death of his cause stab at him, alike to a knife in his heart, refusing to spill more of his men's blood on the altar of lies and broken oaths. Withdrawing henceforth from the siege, the Iron Warriors began their preparations to concoct a battle of their own choosing, for when the siege was done, caring not for the threats that when Horus had deposed the Emperor, their throats would be the next to be cut. 10,000 Dark Angels, under the command of Paladin Captain Corswain, infiltrated the blockade of the traitors, using cloaking technologies outfitted to the Emperor's flagship, the Imperator Somnium, provided by Admiral Niora Sukasen of the Sikaar Command Staff. Fired upon by the fleet of the Death Guard, commanded by Typhus the Traveler, the guns of the Terminus Est and Conqueror tore the chariot of the Emperor to shreds as the Dark Angels' fleet hastened their descent towards the Throne World. Ordered by the command staff of the Phalanx not to utilize their Psychic Arda due to the ongoing Edict of Nicaea and mistrust of Warpcraft, the Dark Angels established a foothold within the Hollow Mountains, confronting the entrenched forces of the Demon Prince, Vasukela. Their forces proved vulnerable without the use of their librarians. Yet as the Thralls of Chaos ready to deliver the killing blow against Corswain, the enigmatic Calibanite, Vasago, unleashed his powers. On orders from Sar Luther and his lieutenant Zahariel to aid his kinsman with a clandestine band of fallen angels by his side, though the Caliban separatists were opposed to the Lion's ideals, they could not allow the War Master's victory. Driving the remaining Emperor's children and their demon allies from the Astronomicon facility, Corswain reluctantly agreed to allow Vasago to unleash the Arcanum of Caliban to relight the Astronomicon. Betrayed by his fallen kinsmen for aiding the plight of the Lion's wayward scions, the Calibanite Astartes of Luther murdered Vasago, preventing the Astronomicon's light from beckoning the true sons of their Primarch from reaching Terra. Though the lightless Hollow Mountain was now secured, simultaneously, captured Terran civilians were now forced to construct fortifications, those craving release from their torment deployed to act as meat shields for the traitors' advancing forces. Meeting with a prefect of the Ordo Sinister within the Imperial Palace, Rogel Dorn assumed command of the peculiar Legio of Pariahs, with sanction given by the Emperor, deploying them to the Mercury Wall to face Death's Hand. Countering the warp-infused Legio Mortis with the Nightmare Titans prior forbidden from ever waging war unless expressly permitted by the Master of Mankind, the left hand of the Emperor marched to face the War Master's God Machines. The chamber fell silent. Jiang Sai glanced at his fellow Khans. Some were as new as him, commanding 100 or so blades. Some were veterans of the Crusade, and led twice that number. Each one of them trusted their Primarch more than they trusted the evidence of their own senses. They had followed him in every battle since the breaking of Unity, and that trust had been repaid with survival against the current of the darkest tide. They were as loyal as it was possible to be. They were united in purpose. They knew no fear. And yet, when Kulan spoke, it was as if he merely vocalized the same thought that they all had running through their minds. "My Khan?" he ventured, not from any lack of resolve, but because it needed to be asked now, needed to be settled, before pulling away became impossible. "Can we do this?" The Kargan nodded fractionally. Acknowledging the question, he pressed his fingers harder together. "Not if we delay," he said quietly. "Another day, maybe two, and the moment is gone. Once he has everything in place, we do not have the strength to break him. It will be while he is consumed with his own conquests. He has the numbers, he has the gifts, he has the power. All we have is what we have always relied on, to be faster." He smiled darkly. "See, what can we really do for this Imperium? Can we sustain it now, bearing its weight on our shoulders? Not the way we were made, but we can kill for it. We can break, we can burn, we can unmake." The smile disappeared. "We have done everything they asked of us. We have held their battle line, scored it with our own blood, and it has not been enough. If we are to die here, on a world that has no soul and no open sky to rejoice in, then we will die doing what we were schooled to do." He looked out across the entire chamber, making each Khan feel as if he were the only one there, the only one to enjoy this final confidence before the war horns were sounded and the engines were gunned. "But get me to my brother," the Khan said, "and as eternity is my judge, I shall scour his stench from the universe forever." Caged within the confines of the Imperial Palace, though the White Scars Legion had already proved themselves as stalwart defenders of humanity's final bastion, their restlessness was not yet sated. Their new blood Astartes, raised during the Civil War, now burdened with the responsibility of replacing veteran officers felled by traitor hands, captains such as Jiang Sai Khan waited patiently for a chance to prove their worth in the eyes of their Genesire. The Tachseer, Shiban Khan, returning to active duty following a hasty treatment of his wounds and augmetics, the Kargan learned from his son that the Lionsgate spaceport had been abandoned in order to allow for the success of the Saturnine Gambit. Restraining his cold fury as he rallied his senior officers, the Warhawk of Chagoris made plans to retake the spaceport, currently garrisoned by the Death Guard Legion. Orchestrating a three-pronged assault from the Colossi Bastion to their objective, the Ordu Jagatai would be supported by the 1st Terran Armored, gathered by their stalwart comrade, Ilya Revelian, and drive back the Pale King and his decrepit sons. Using the skyplate suspended above the palace to shield their advance from orbital attacks, the Kargan rode out to cleanse the thralls of Nurgle from the spaceport. Successfully assaulting the Lion's Gate with a hasty forward charge of armored vehicles and jet bikes, the White Scars buckled against the fortitude of the Death Guard as their forces began to slow, fighting within the now corrupted confines of the facility. Realizing the need to sever their command structure to prevent a protracted skirmish, the Warhawk demanded the Pale King face him in single combat to end their long-standing feud. Ascended to the form of a demon prince since their last engagement upon the soil of Prospero, Mortarion bloodied the Warhawk within an inch of his life as the Kargan baited his assaults with biting insults. Refusing to surrender to the pain racking his body, nor damage done to his pride, Jagatai Khan allowed the Pale King to impale him with the blade of his war scythe, Silence. Drawing Mortarion close enough to strike him, the Warhawk decapitated Mortarion, banishing the Pale King into the tides of the warp as disarray racked both sides of the conflict. As the Death Guard faltered with the loss of their Primarch, the White Scars, enraged at the sight of their broken Genesire, unleashed their wrath, retrieving Jagatai's body to be hastily treated for his wounds. While all medical scanning devices showed readings of his demise, faint traces of life miraculously prevented the Kargan from escaping his mortal coil. The 14th Legion, now leaderless, deferred to their equerry, Kaifer Morag for command. Withdrawing from the fray temporarily, as First Captain Typhus advised his kinsmen to ally to his own cause. Having waited for his Primarch's humbling before launching his assault of the Hollow Mountain, Typhus recruited Morag and the remaining Death Guard to his cause to face the Dark Angels. Mercury Wall sustained heavy structural damage, the aid of the Legio Sinister buying the Praetorian time as he rallied his men to fortify the breach before its inevitable collapse. Reconciling with his estranged son, Sigismund, Rogel Dorn bid him to return to the Bab Bastion, knowing that all his best-made plans would soon devolve into battles of slaughter. The martial skill of his favored son, crucial to stemming the tides of traitors with blade in hand. Intercepted by the chosen of the Sigillite, Khalid Hassan, Sigismund beheld an ancient sword of black steel, taken from Malcador's most prized treasury of weapons. Feeling its considerable weight as he felt it in his grip, Sigismund knew it would regardless never slow his sword arm, for this weapon, as stated by Khalid, was destined for his hand. Finally, after heavy casualties lost to the guns of the Loyalists, Legio Mortis sundered the Mercury Wall, spilling traitors of the Sons of Horus and World Eaters into the breach. Countless warriors clashed, their honor rolls, heraldry, and company markings smothered with gore as the melee intensified. Yet one title was ushered within the erupting mayhem like no other: the Black Sword. Felling countless champions of the 12th and 16th Legions, Sigismund carved a path through the swarm as his new blade drank deep the blood of traitors. Once more dueling the infamous butcher of the World Eaters' 8th Company, Khan, in the shadow of the Terminus Tower, Sigismund's silent, unswerving focus bested the rabid champion of Khorne, his blade delivering the final killing strike, infused with the weight of nihilistic emptiness. As Khan's lifeless body was dragged from the fray, the isolated white scars of the Lionsgate spaceport prepared to fire upon the traitor fleet as Imperial fists and Blood Angels fell back to the palace's inner sanctum. The battle was reaching its zenith, and although Primarchs Perturabo, Mortarion, and Fulgrim had fled the field, the Red Angel still hungered for the blood of the Emperor. The Primarch beat his wings with his back to the enemy. He faced the defenders upon the wall, his pinions keeping him aloft, as the dawn's pathetic light did its best to spark flares from the edges of his golden armor. Hololithic incarnations of his hovering form flickered into life across Vambrace consoles and view screens within the keep. They sprang up from handheld projectors, thousands of identical, tiny blue light ghosts with beating wings. Sanguinius's words, carried across the kilometers of elevated wall, brought to distant ears on the clicking, ticking, crackling speakers of servo skulls and Mechanicus drones. Soldiers clustered around their data slates to bear witness to the Primarch's proclamation. The 100,000 defenders of the Delphic battlement, drawn from all across the burning Imperium, listened to the words of the Great Angel. All of them could see him, even if they were far from his sight and forced to rely on a hololithic reflection. All of them could hear him, even if his words purred through the cracking mouth of a floating probe. Land had expected a speech, dripping with demagogic inspiration. He'd find it tawdry, but knew most of the human defenders, many of whom responded far more positively to the Primarchs than the Mechanicus did, would find great value in such a display. But that was not what he, nor any of them, received. "I do not want to be here," Sanguinius told them. "I do not want this present, and I want the future that follows even less. We stand against our own brothers and sisters, with our backs to the Eternity Gate, and this is not a battle we can win. If you have ever wondered how you will die, now you know. If you have ever wondered where your body will lie, now you know. You will be killed on the last wall between hope and horror. Your body will lie here, unburied, staring up at a poisoned sky. Once the sanctum falls, terror falls with it. And I tell you, we cannot hold this wall. You can see it yourselves. They are too many, we are too few. We may last a week, if we do the impossible. More likely we will all be dead in 3 days. Perhaps my words surprise you, or frighten you, but I will not lie. Not to you who have come through 200 days of dread only to find yourselves here. I have looked into your faces and see what this war has cost all of you. I have followed the flow of battles that each of you have survived, to stand here on the final battlement. I see everything you have endured, those stories written in the light of your eyes. Now the War Master offers you the lie of life, promising a mercy his forces are incapable of showing if we will abandon this last wall. And it falls to me, here and now, to tell you to stand against him one more time, to give everything you have, even your lives, if it will hold this rampart for another day, another hour, another second. That is what the moment demands of me, is it not? That I beg you to make one last sacrifice?
Sanguinius swooped closer to the battlement, casting his sword to the stone. It clattered there, in a loose cluster of blood angels, none of whom made any attempt to pick it up. Lan stared at it for a long moment, then watched as the Primarch whirled in the sky to face the wall once more, showing his bare hands to the gathered thousands.
No.
Sanguinius fairly breathed the word. His wings beat hard, holding him aloft. He stared into the silence that met his disavowal, and he shook his head to punctuate the syllable with adamance.
No, I will not ask it of you. You have already given everything. You have already done everything asked of you 100 times and more. You have suffered through a war of unimaginable darkness, one that has demanded more from you than any soldier in the history of our species has been forced to give. The fact you still live, that you still fight, I cannot conceive of the courage and resilience it requires for you to face this dawn and look to the horizon with a rifle in your hands.
Lan could hear army soldiers shuffling. He saw them glancing at each other. None of them spoke. All of them held rapt to the Primarch's words.
Where Horus has offered only lies, I will offer you truth. Those of you that wish to run, run. Leave this place, not in shame at a duty undone, not in surrender to the traitor's forces, but with honor. Go with my gratitude, for you have already given everything asked of you. What right does anyone have to demand more from you who have endured harrowing beyond account, horror beyond measure? If you wish to fall back into the Sanctum Imperialis and spend the last hours of your life with your children, then do so. Know that you go not only with my blessing, but with my envy. If you wish to leave the wall and take your chances in the wasteland before the battle begins, then, in the Emperor's name, you have earned the right to try. Go swiftly and carry with you the pride that you have already given a hero's share in a war that none of us wanted, but were forced to fight. And if you wish for the truth, I will give it to you gladly, for you have earned that too. It shames me to admit, but I would abandon this wall if I could. The Primarch in me, the supposed demigod half of my heart, craves life with a ferocity that shames me. If I bowed to that instinct, I would take to the sky and never look back. But I cannot. I am half human, and the human in me demands that I stay.
Sanguinius turned, looking over his shoulder at the retreating emissary. Daughter of Torment was a quarter of the way to her lines now. When he looked at the wall once again, all could see the resolve in his eyes.
There are legends about me. I hear them whispered among you every day, that I know the moment of my own death. The stories say this gives me courage, that I feel no fear because I know I cannot yet be slain. Here is the truth of that tale. That prophesied death is coming. Today, tonight, tomorrow. I know not when or how, only that I feel fate's breath on the back of my neck. I do not remain here out of immortality's courage. I remain here because, if I am to die, I choose this death. I choose to die with my back to the last door. I choose to give my life to buy another hour, or a minute, or even a single second of grace to those who cannot be here fighting with me. I choose to die here because I do not believe I have yet given all I can. Someone must stand and fight, and if I have but one choice left, I will make it now. I will stand. I will fight. I will hold this wall, knowing that the 13th Legion makes for terror with all speed, and if they cannot bring salvation, they will bring retribution. Whether I am alone or whether 100,000 of you are by my side, when the War Master's horde descends upon this wall, they will find me waiting for them with a blade in hand. Not because I can win, but because it is right. I do not know what delusion grips those out there who were once our brothers and sisters, but I know it is right to oppose them.
Silence drifted over the Delphic battlement, but only for a moment. Sanguinius swept his arm across the wall, taking in the defenders.
Thousands of hollow ghosts of his image did the very same thing. I have spoken enough. You need hear no more of my fears and confessions. All that remains is for me to ask, will you run? Returning the Warhawk's body to the Imperial Palace, those White Scars who had withdrawn to the Lionsgate spaceport began preparations to fire upon the War Master's fleet. Small victories in short supply as traitor scum clamored to scale the walls of the final vigil of the Loyalist defense. The great angel Sanguinius made every effort to inspire bravery within the hearts of the defenders. Little more than a frenzied rabble, with so much of its command structure slain or displaced, the horde of traitors dispersed into mobs of violent monsters, striking at the last remaining command center of the Loyalists, the Bab Bastion. Radiation incurred from orbital bombardment laced the planet's surface. The death knell of the throne world, sown deep within its core, fated to slowly deteriorate, no matter the technologies employed to sustain its lifespan. The traitor legions and those who served them fared no better, for even within the bowels of the World Eater's flagship, Conqueror, water reserves turned to blood. Cannibalism ran rampant, and members of their command staff, such as Ship Mistress Lotara Saren, questioned why they had sided with the War Master's cause in the first place. The Butcher's nails dug ever deeper into the minds of the World Eaters, their frenzied slaughter further plunging them into madness, forgetting all vestiges of the proud warriors they once were. Driven only by the example of their demon Primarch, Angron, the Red Angel acted as the blood-soaked North Star to which his men followed. Confronting the parodies of Astartes that remained, Blood Angel's officers, such as Nasir Amit and Dominion Zephon, cut down their corrupted former comrades in arms. Honoring the teachings of his Primarch as a noble paragon of what the Astartes could become, the Flesh Terror reminisced on his own sordid past as he refused to stoop to the barbarism displayed by the World Eaters. After months of silence, War Master Horus Lupercal declared the next objective of the assault, the Eternity Gate, the final passage leading to the Emperor's throne room. As Constantine Valdor, Diocletian Koros, Primarch Vulcan, and his chosen Darksword stood ready to confront any and all threats, while Angron's forces rallied to strike from the palace's gates, Magnus the Red attempted to strike from the veil of the Immaterium. As the Lord of Drakes ventured into the webway to face his brother in single combat, 70,000 warriors lined the Delphic battlement in defense of the Eternity Gate, mustering Astartes, refugees, and even wounded soldiers to defend its domains. Millions of fell pawns of chaos amassed as Angron loomed in the skies above, cackling with delight at their diligent toil, erecting crucified captured loyalists pinned to armored vehicles and Titan war machines. Ending the misery of his own Gene-son, Captain Edemus of the 99th Company, with a shot of an arquebus, Sanguinius subsequently took to the sky, proclaiming that those who wished to flee must do so before the battle had been joined. None refusing their duty to stand in the defense of the Imperial Palace, the loyalists inspired by his words watched as his wings carried him to the Reaver Titan, daughter of Torment, which had so callously tortured his cherished son. Beheading the war machine before returning to defend the Eternity Gate, Sanguinius heard the booming cheers of the Loyalists as the daughter of Torment's headless body collapsed into the traitor ranks. Meanwhile, Vulcan journeyed to the impossible city of the Webway, facing his demonic brother Magnus in a game of death, rebirth, and determination. Perishing over and over again as the psychic onslaught of Magnus immolated his body, Vulcan refused to surrender to pain as his skin reknitted with each and every mortal blow. Weakening the Crimson King through pure attrition, the Lord of Drake struck his form with the Thunderhammer, Erdrakul, the tricks and illusions of Magnus, unable to break the resolve of the Perpetual Primarch. Outside the palace walls, pawns of the Blood God hurled themselves at the Eternity Gate, the Emperor's psychic wards weakening as demonic incursions began to seep through to the inner sanctum. Spewing World Eaters from their disfigured mouths, Cornate Titans tackled the walls of the palace, whilst Loyalist guns ran dry and blades became dull. The Demon Prince, Karbanda, embittered to his humbling by the Great Angel, screamed vengeance against his sons, his penance made to the Blood God for his defeat. Tasked with claiming 500 kills of the Angel's sons within his presence, as the Bloodthirster burst through the Delphic battlements, Sanguinius once more battled the Chosen of Khorne. Breaking the demon's spine with the hilt of his sword, the Great Angel cast down Karbanda's immobilized body to be feasted on by the lesser demons, eager to gorge on his flesh below. The gates of eternity, held open by Ursa's claws, fired from the traitor Legio Audax. As Diocletian ordered all hands to close the gates, Sanguinius targeted the immense chains, straining to keep the gates in place. Intercepted by the Red Angel as they brawled within the skies above the palace, Angron and Sanguinius wrestled as their airborne attacks hurtled them through hive spires, titans, and stormbirds. Impaled by the Black Blade, Voragoth, as Horus's voice whispered in his mind, Sanguinius refused to add to the weapon's tally of 1,000,000 souls consumed to sharpen its edge. Tearing the butcher's nails from Angron's scalp, the Red Angel screamed in agony before his cranium exploded, Sanguinius banishing the immortal Primarch into the tides of the warp and sowing disarray into the ranks of his sons. Overcome with psychic hysteria with the loss of their master, the World Eaters turned on their allies, giving a brief reprieve to the loyalist defenders. Closing the Eternity Gate, as Shiban Khan's White Scars fired the Lionsgate spaceport's anti-orbital batteries upon the traitor fleet. Further compounding the traitor assault, news reached Holy Terror from Rabute Gilliman. His armada with support from the Lion, Ravenlord, and Wolf King was only a week from arriving in orbit. The traitors had run out of time, and in their hour of desperation, the War Master made one final gambit to end the siege. The vengeful spirit shifted into low orbit and lowered its shields. He is not dead. You cry out in anger and despair. You try to snatch the power back into yourself, but it is pulled around you in a great black slick, sticky and sluggish, slow to respond, slow to obey, reluctant to inhabit the vessel of your body now that you have scorned it. You draw it back in as quickly as you can. You inhale to fill your lungs and soul with it. You gather it in, frantically, for you must be ready to defend yourself. The worst of it, your human heart, still raw and exposed, feels relief, a kind of joy. Your father is not dead. Your father is not dead. You didn't kill him. He lives. Loken faces you. His sword is in his hand, but it's not Loken. It never was. Loken is still sprawled on the deck to your left, where you threw him, gazing on in horror. Or is it wonder? You will not die like this. You will not be tricked like this. The power begins to flood back into your veins, the darkness of it, the sweet agony, the reassuring rage, the strength. Loken steps towards you, the other Loken, the Loken who is not Loken. The sword in his hand is not Rubio's old blade. The sword in his hand is the great war sword. The face is not Loken's, it is his face. The aspect of Loken collapses into void mist as your father steps out to meet you in all his bloody majesty. His wounds are great. Blood is dried black across his face and his ruined arm. But there is a light inside him, a light behind his eyes, the pure white light of a species that, in its madness, believes in him beyond all reason and trusts in him beyond all logic. A species that imagines him to be its shield and protector, and has such faith in that act of imagination, it is made real. He could not fight you alone, he could not beat you alone. But by bluff and ruse and stratagem and sacrifice, he has held your attention until he no longer has to. To be absent in the body is to be present in the Emperor. That's what the Whispers are screaming. A whole species is present here, its will united in one form, not a man, not a father, but a king of all the ages. He looks like a god, a wounded god, but a god nonetheless. It's not his power, it's where it comes from. We are one and the same, the Whispers say, mankind and the Emperor, Emperor and mankind, souls bound together. We are together as one, or we are nothing. You are no god, you shout. Then this will be a fair fight, the Whispers answer. Though the White Scars held the Lionsgate spaceport, their position withstood orbital barrages from the traitor fleet. The Dark Angels held the Hollow Mountain, yet the Astronomicon remained unlit, and what survived of the Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, and Mortal Defenders of Terra were now confined within the Imperial Palace. Time had become irrelevant, for no clock nor monitor could be relied upon, as warp storms surrounded the throne world and transformed the geometry of reality. Unable to counter the impossible deep strikes of traitor assaults, the Loyalists knew in their hearts that within as little as a day, their resistance shall end. Yet on the horizon, reinforcements loom, and in his madness, Horus knows that his heresy is mere hours from being undone. His benefactors unable to protect him from the Imperium's might, should he be pincered between the throne world and the fleet of Ultramar. With no more traitor Primarchs to command his armies, demons take their stead, such as Doombreed, Be'lakor, Nakari, Kulgarth, Skarbrand, Ulker, and other fell entities. Knowing the lowering of the Vengeful Spirit's shield to be a trap, the Loyalists nonetheless could not deny the desperation of the Warmaster, resolving to teleport to the Lupercal's court to capitalize on the double-edged sword which Horus wielded. Summoning the Primarchs Vulcan, Sanguinius, Dorn, and Captain General Constantin Valdor to the throne room, Malcador and his champions witnessed the Emperor rise from the Golden Throne. Replacing his master upon the Golden Throne, sacrificing his life to allow the assault of the Warmaster's flagship, Malcador the hero began his terminal vigil, overseen by the Lord of Drakes. Donning the immaculate golden armor of his warrior aspect, the Emperor rallied Valdor and Dorn to his side. Relenting to Sanguinius' pleas to fight at his side, despite the great angel knowing the fate which would befall him. Entrusting command of the Imperial Palace to Huskal Arcamus of the Imperial Fists in their absence, the assault party of the Emperor teleported to the Vengeful Spirit. Displaced by the interference of chaos, Rogal Dorn materialized within a desert filled with the dead forms of his sons, resisting the call of the Blood God as he endured what seemed like centuries searching for an escape. Upon arrival of the Custodian Guard to the Voidcraft, these pure warriors, despite their pedigree, fell to madness, blood weeping from their eyes as they turned their spears against the Emperor. Cutting down his precious companions as hatred for his once cherished son burgeoned in his heart, the gamble to harm the Master of Mankind doing little more than strengthening his resolve, with each custodian slain by his hand. Simultaneously, Corswain of the Dark Angels, now aided by the wolf in sheep's clothing under the guise of the Lord Cypher, Librarian Zahariel, aided his defense of the Astronomicon against the forces of Typhus the Traveler. Reports of Guilliman's fleet reached Loyalist command moments following the boarding party's departure. Their amassed strength 9 hours from arriving within orbit, likely blocked by Horus until evidence of their departure had been confirmed. Unable to locate Terra due to the lack of the Astronomicon, Vulcan refused advisements to sacrifice Psykers to empower Malcador's psychic strength in order to activate the Astronomicon to direct Guilliman's fleet. Constantin Valdor and his custodian retinue carved a path through the bowels of the Vengeful Spirit, his confrontation with Abaddon the Despoiler revealing portents of a future too terrible to comprehend before being cast into the void. Yet one glimmer of hope had managed to evade the manipulations of chaos, the crimson-clad Seraphs and their great angel. Fighting their way to the throne room, the Blood Angels, by the side of their wounded yet resolute Primarch, carved through the Sons of Horus ranks and their Justeran elite, his blade in Carmine and Spear of Telesto felling hundreds as they inexorably charged for the Warmaster's throne room. Facing Horus in single combat, the great angel's blade nicked and carved at his face, cleaving through the Warmaster's midsection to the bone with a strike that might have slain him, were it not for his fell benefactors. No longer restraining his power, Horus retaliated, destroying the angel's advantage of flight by slamming him to the ground, breaking his wings. Bludgeoning the great angel to death with his war mace, Worldbreaker, the Warmaster delighted as he watched Sanguinius drown in the blood filling his lungs, before crucifying his body as a gaudy ornamentation within his court. The angel's sons who remained, convulsed with the psychic shockwave of their genesire's death, knife legionaries upon the soil of Terra, tearing their enemies to shreds as despair for the loss of their Primarch drove them to madness. Rogal Dorn and Constantin Valdor reuniting far from the Lupercal's court, as desperate struggles waged between mankind's broken demigods, the final battle of truly deific proportions began. Confronting his fallen son, alongside the lunar wolf Garviel Loken, Astartes Primogenitor, Litu, and custodian Hateron Proconsul, Caecaltus Dusk, the Emperor and his companions faced the Lupercal. Infusing their weapons with his holy light, sons and fathers battled. The sacrifice of Caecaltus Dusk, mortal wounds delivered by Litu, and presence of Loken's defiance, distracting the Warmaster. Gravely injured from the battle at the hands of the Lupercal, As his companions forestalled his attacks, the Emperor delivered the final strike, ending the reign of the War Master of Chaos. Retrieved by Constantine Valdor and Rogel Dorn as they rushed to their father's aid too late, the Loyalists returned to the palace with the corpse of the Angel, the skull of Ferrus Manus, and the broken body of their liege. Finding a card of the Emperor's tarot beside his immobilized form, signifying the card Throne, Dorn and Valdor agreed to inter what remained of the Emperor upon the Golden Throne. Every demon of the warp banished from the material realm with the death of the War Master, the traitor armies retreated as the fleet of Niora Sukasen revealed their position within Saturn's rings and harried Voidcraft attempting to flee the Sol system. Arriving in system to find grief racking both sides of the conflict, the Loyalist armada of Rabute Gilliman and the Lion beheld the fallout of this devastating war, the first nail in the coffin of humanity's extinction. Hunting those that remained within the Sol system, driven by spite, vengeance and loss, the Imperium of Man began the Great Scouring to cleanse the galaxy of their fallen kinsmen, driving the traitors into the Eye of Terror to remain forever within the embrace of their false gods. Though humanity had preserved the fulcrum of its birth and the rule of the God Emperor, many speculate that mutually assured destruction may have been preferable. The burning stops. The psychic beam abates. You sway, gasping. Your father has a knife, an old stone thing. What is it? It's so small in his hand, so ugly. That won't do it. That won't be enough. He seems to hesitate, reluctant. You clench, in sudden spasm and convulsion, and cry out. The power is returning. It is flowing back into you with great rapidity, as though the Old Four are suddenly desperate to restore their gifts. What do they know? What have they seen that makes them act in such haste? Your father looks at the knife.
I wait for you, and I forgive you.
He drives it into your heart. Loken is on his feet. He sees the blade glint. A simple stone knife won't break that plate. Something so small surely can't. The blade goes in. Heart thrust, the quick mercy stroke of a custodian's misericordia. Practical and unfussy. The two figures freeze together for a moment. The kneeling son, the standing father, joined by the knife. And through that blade, the Emperor channels the full force of his will. The sublime power, a psychic blast of profound magnitude, courses down the ancient blade, like lightning conducting through a metal rod. A fireball flash of its strike is brighter than all creation. Then, the light begins to die. A darkness falls quickly. It is not the glossy blackness of the court's infinite architecture. It is soft and mute, like the advent of night or the dimming of vision and sense. Horus smiles. His smile is no longer the terrible smile that greeted them when they entered the Lupercal court. The smile that shivered the world with mortal dread. It is now the smile Loken remembers from long ago. There is no blood. The aim is sharp, sharp enough to cut space, sharp enough to slice reality. It has waited a long, long time for this. From the original killing that made it, and stained it with the shadow of all murder, to this, the 8th death that it was promised. Horus smiles. The smile vanishes. Then so does flesh, lips and mouth, revealing another smile, a rictus grin of teeth, a mask of bone. There is no redemption, for the time for that is long gone. There is only resignation. And in the end, it's just a man killing his son with a stone. The blade slides out and turns to dust. The body falls. And then the galaxy burns. This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. Horus Lupercal's ambition rolled the galaxy in twain through acts of deception, treachery, betrayal, and hubris. Gaining the upper hand swiftly and backed by the influence of beings beyond the pale of the material realm, his scheming would inevitably be undone by the actions of righteous champions and defiant mortals. It is often pondered what the benefits of moral character are when all around persons of more nefarious character pilfer the spoils of honest benefactors in the great game of life. Growing bloated with power, wealth, and influence, those who dominate the wellsprings of prosperity, no matter their flaunting of success, nevertheless often diminish the legacy they leave behind for those who aspire for greatness. Should you nurture crops of immensity, be generous with their harvest, for those who share them with those less powerful or fortunate shall be remembered for their piety. The call of trickery, backstabbing, and manipulation, a poisoned chalice for those who have drunk deep from the well of kindness, compassion, and humility.